Hi friends, hope you enjoyed Ramona the Pest. Our next chapter book read aloud will be Henry Huggins. It is by the same author, Beverly Cleary. Here is the cover. And if you remember, Henry Huggins was a neighbor of Ramona and a classmate of Beezus. He was also the crossing guard that helped Ramona get out of the mud when she got stuck with her brand new shiny red boots. Chapter 1, Henry and Ribs. Henry Huggins was in the 3rd grade. His hair looked like a scrubbing brush, and most of his grown-up front teeth were in. He lived with his mom and dad in a square white house on Klickitat Street. Now, except for having his tonsils out when he was 6, and breaking his arm falling out of a cherry tree when he was 7, nothing much happened to Henry. I wish something exciting would happen, Henry often thought. But nothing very interesting ever happened to Henry, at least not until one Wednesday afternoon in March. Now, every Wednesday after school, Henry rode downtown on the Muni bus to go swimming at the local YMCA. After he swam for an hour, he'd get on the bus again and ride home just in time for dinner. It was lots of fun, but not really exciting. When Henry left the YMCA after swimming on this particular Wednesday, he stopped to watch a guy tearing down a poster from a circus that had been in town. Then, with some change in his pocket, he went to the corner store to buy a chocolate ice cream cone. His plan was to buy the ice cream cone, eat it, get on the bus, put his money in, and ride home. That is not what happened. Henry bought the ice cream cone and paid for it with some of his change. On his way out of the drugstore, he stopped at the magazine rack to look at some comic books. It was a free look because he didn't have enough money to buy a new book. He stood there licking his chocolate ice cream cone and reading a comic book when he heard a thump, thump, thump. Henry turned, and there behind him was a dog. The dog was scratching himself. He wasn't any special kind of dog. He was too small to be a big dog, but on the other hand, he was much too big to be a little dog. He wasn't a white dog because parts of him were brown and other parts were black, and in between there were yellowish patches. His ears stood up and his tail was long and thin. The dog was hungry. When Henry licked, the dog licked. When Henry swallowed, the dog swallowed. "Hello, you old dog," Henry said. "You can't have my ice cream cone." Swish, swish, swish went the tail. "Just one bite," the dog's brown eyes seemed to say. "Go away," Henry ordered, but he wasn't very firm about it, and he patted the dog's head. The tail wagged harder. Henry took one last lick. "Oh, all right, if you're that hungry, you might as well have it." The ice cream cone disappeared in one gulp. "Now go away," Henry told the dog. "I gotta catch the bus to go home." He started for the dog. The dog started too. "Oh, go away, you old skinny dog," but he didn't say it very loudly. "Go on home." The dog sat down at Henry's feet. Henry looked at the dog, and the dog looked at Henry. "I don't think you've got a home. You're awful thin. I can see your ribs showing right through your skin." "Thump, thump, thump," replied the tail. "And you don't have a collar," said Henry. Henry began to think. If only he could keep the dog. He'd always wanted a dog. and now he had found a dog that wanted him. He couldn't go home and leave a hungry dog on the street corner. If only he knew what his mom and dad would say. He touched the coins in his pocket. That was it. He'd used one of his coins to call his mom. Now, this book came out over 70 years ago, and there were no cell phones, so he had to use a payphone. You can ask your mom and dad what a payphone is. Come on, Ribsy. Come on, Ribs, old boy. I'm going to call you Ribsy, 'cause I can see your ribs, you're so skinny. Hey, Ribsy boy. The dog trotted after the boy to the telephone booth in the corner of the drugstore. It was like a small glass closet. Henry shoved Ribsy into the booth and shut the door. He'd never used a payphone before. He had to put the telephone book on the floor and stand on tiptoe in order to reach the mouthpiece. He dialed the number and put his money in the slot. Hello, Mom? Why, Henry! His mom sounded surprised. Where are you, dear? I'm at the corner store near the Y. Ribs began to scratch and thump with his tail. Thump, thump, thump. Inside the telephone booth, the thumps sounded loud and hollow. For goodness grief, Henry, what's that noise? His mother demanded. Ribs began to whimper, and then to howl. Henry! Mrs. Huggins shouted. Are you all right? Yes, I'm all right, Henry shouted back. He never could understand why his mom always thought something had happened to him when nothing ever did. That's just Ribsy. Ribsy? His mother was confused and exasperated. Henry, will you please tell me what's going on? I'm trying to, Henry explained. Oh! Ribsy howled louder. People were starting to gather around the phone booth to see what the racket was. Mother, I found a dog. I sure wish I could keep him. He's a good dog, and I'd feed him and wash him and walk him and everything. Please, Mom? Oh, I don't know, Henry dear, his mother said. You'll have to ask your father. Mom, that's what you always say. Henry was tired of standing on tiptoe, and the phone booth was getting warm. Mom, please say yes, and I'll never ask for anything. Another thing, not as long as I live. Well, all right, Henry. I guess there isn't any reason why you shouldn't have a dog, but you'll have to bring him home on the bus. Your dad has the car today, and I can't come get you. Do you think you can manage? Sure, easy. And Henry, please don't be late. It looks like it might rain. All right. Thump, thump, thump. Henry, what's that thumping noise? It's my dog, Ribsy. He's scratching a flea. Oh, Henry, Mrs. Huggins moaned. Couldn't you have found a dog without fleas? Henry thought that was a good time to hang up. Come on, Ribs, he said. We're going home on the bus. When the big green bus stopped in front of the drugstore, Henry picked up his dog. Ribsy was heavier than he expected. He had a hard time getting him into the bus and was wondering how he'd get the money out of his pocket when the driver said, Say, Sonny, you can't take that dog on the bus. Why not? Asked Henry. Oh, it's a company rule, Sonny. No dogs allowed on the buses. Golly, mister, how am I going to get him home? I just got to get him home. Sorry, Sonny. I don't make the rules. No animal can ride on a bus unless it's inside a box. Oh, gee. Well, thanks anyway, said Henry doubtfully, and carried Ribsy off the bus. Well, I guess we'll have to get a box. I'll get you on the next bus somehow, promised Henry. He went back into the store, followed closely by Ribsy. "Hey, have you got a big box I could have, please?" he asked the man at the counter. "I need one big enough to fit my dog." The clerk leaned over the counter to look at Ribsy. "Cardboard box?" he asked. "Yes, please," said Henry, wishing the man would hurry. He didn't want to be late getting home. The man pulled a box out from under the counter. "This hairspray box is the only one I have. I guess it's big enough. But why anyone would want to put a dog in a box, I don't understand." The box was about 2 feet square and 6 inches deep. On one end it was printed, "Don't let 'em call you Baldy," and on the other, "Try our large economy size." Henry thanked the clerk, carried the box to the bus stop, and put it on the sidewalk. And here is a picture of Henry coming out of the store with Ribsy in the hair tonic box. Let's see. Henry thanked the clerk, carried the box to the bus stop, and put it on the sidewalk. Ribsy walked after him. "Come on, get in, fellow," Henry commanded. Ribsy understood. He stepped into the box and sat down just as the next bus came around the corner. Henry had to kneel to pick up the box. It was not a very strong box, and he had to put his arms under it. He staggered as he lifted it, feeling like a strong man who lifted weights at the circus. Ribsy lovingly licked his face with his wet tongue. "Ah, hey, cut that out," Henry ordered. "You better be good if you're going to ride on the bus with me." The bus stopped at the curb. When it was Henry's turn to get on, he had trouble finding the step because he couldn't see it. He had to try several times before he nailed it. Then he realized he'd forgotten to take his money out of his pocket, and he was afraid to put the box down because he thought Ribsy might climb out. He turned sideways to the driver and asked, "Excuse me, driver, could you please take the money out of my pocket for me? My hands are full." The driver pushed his cap back on his head and said, "Full? I should say they are full. Just where do you think you're going with that animal?" "Home?" said Henry in a small voice. The passengers were staring, and most of them were smiling. The box was getting heavier every minute. "Not on this bus, you're not," said the driver. "But the man on the last bus said I could take the dog on the bus in a box. He said it was a company rule." And that's where we're going to stop for today. We'll tune in tomorrow for another couple minutes of Henry Huggins. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great day.